Karoline, just following up on Greenland, why not rule out taking it by military force?
I know that past presidents and past leaders have often ruled things out. They've often been very open about ruling things in and basically broadcasting their foreign policy strategy to the rest of the world, not just to our allies, but most egregiously to our adversaries. That's not something this president does. All options are always on the table for President Trump as he examines what's in the best interests of the United States.
The president has been adamant that he is now in charge of Venezuela, but Delcy Rodriguez said the government of Venezuela runs her country, no one else, saying, quote, there's no external agent governing Venezuela. So which one is it?
Let me just be very clear. This is the first time that I've addressed Venezuela from the podium since being back and since the historic and incredibly successful military operation, law enforcement operation conducted by our United States military that you all saw and the world witnessed last week. The skill, the might of the United States military and our country under the leadership of this president is on full display to the rest of the world. And let's just set the record straight. There isn't another military in the world who could have pulled off this operation. There is not another president in the world or in our nation's history who had the courage to authorize such a mission. And I think the world has taken notice that America is truly back. With respect to Venezuela, the Trump administration, led by Secretary Rubio, the vice president, and the president's entire national security team, is in close correspondence with the interim authorities in Venezuela. We obviously have maximum leverage over the interim authorities in Venezuela right now, and the president has made it very clear that this is a country within the United States, the Western Hemisphere, close by the United States, that is no longer going to be sending illegal drugs to the United States of America. It's no longer going to be sending and trafficking illegal people and criminal cartels to kill American citizens as they have in the past. And the president is fully deploying his peace through strength foreign policy agenda. So we're continuing to be in close coordination with the interim authorities, and their decisions are going to continue to be dictated by the United States of America.
Just one follow-up, when you talk about that leverage there, has the Venezuelan government fully committed to turning over its oil to the United States indefinitely, and what happens if they do not?
Well, as you saw, the president announced last night, this was a deal. This was a deal made by the president and his team with the Venezuelan interim authorities. This will benefit both the American people and the Venezuelan people. And Secretary Wright and the Department of Energy are working with the interim authorities and also with the private oil industry to execute on this historic energy deal. That's not only good for the United States, but it's also going to revive the prosperity, the safety, the security of both the United States and Venezuela as well. Ed.
Following up on the oil part of this, the 30 to 50 million barrels of oil, how exactly is that going to work? You're getting it out of Venezuela into the United States?
Yes.
And then what?
That's exactly right. So as you know, Ed, as the president announced last night, this was the sanctioned oil that was basically just sitting in barrels, sitting on ships because of the effective quarantine of the United States of America. And the interim authorities have agreed to release that oil to the United States, so it will be arriving here at home very soon. The United States government has already begun marketing Venezuelan crude oil in the global marketplace for the benefit of the United States, engaged the world's leading commodity marketers, key banks to execute and provide financial support for these crude oil and crude product sales. All proceeds from the sale of Venezuelan crude oil and products will first settle in U.S.-controlled accounts at globally recognized banks to guarantee the legitimacy and integrity of the ultimate distribution of proceeds, and those funds will be dispersed for the benefit of the American people and the Venezuelan people at the discretion of the United States government.
It sounds like it requires a lot of private sector engagement and agreement
And
from the oil industry and the banking industry. Do you have that yet?
There's a lot of private sector engagement that's happening right now. As you know, Secretary Wright, our energy secretary who's heading up this big project, is in Florida today meeting with some of these oil executives. And as we confirmed earlier, they will also be at the White House later this week. So they are absolutely eager to invest. They're eager about these opportunities. And Secretary Wright is a very well-knowledgeable guy when it comes to oil and energy, and he's the perfect man for the job.
Another corner of the world,
Sure.
real quick on
Go
Iran.
ahead. Go ahead.
So just to follow up on the oil, 30 to 50 million barrels is an initial tranche, if you will, and then what happens after that? What
I won't get ahead of the plans that the president and his team are currently speaking with the interim authorities about, but rest assured, there is a long-term plan here. Secretary Rubio and the entire team are working diligently on it, and this is just sort of the first action that you all are seeing. Ed.
Thanks, Caroline. So in order to get these oil companies to invest billions in Venezuela, how will the U.S. reassure that their workers will be safe in Venezuela? Could there be troops involved?
At this point in time, as you know, there are no troops on the ground in Venezuela. The president, of course, reserves the right to use the United States military if necessary. It's not something he wants to do. Diplomacy is always the first option. As you saw, he tried that with Nicolas Maduro, but unfortunately, he was an illegitimate dictator and an unserious person. And so President Trump authorized this law enforcement operation, and now Nicolas Maduro is sitting in a prison cell in New York. So certainly the president is going to do what's in the best interests of the American people, and that includes workers from our energy and oil industry as well.
With that meeting tomorrow, what is the message the president is going to give to the oil executives, and what does he want to hear?
Well, the meeting is on Friday, and it's just a meeting to discuss, obviously, the immense opportunity that is before these oil companies right now. Stephen.
Caroline, and congratulations again.
Thank you.
The New Yorker had a story yesterday on the vice president, and it questioned his, quote, notable absence on Venezuela. And the sub-headline asked, was the vice president's exclusion from the operation in Venezuela an expression of his anti-interventionist ideology or political calculation? Would you be able to discuss the vice president's role in Venezuela policy?
I did see that report in the New Yorker, and quite frankly, I laughed out loud because it's very clear it's a fake report that's trying to sow distrust and division amongst the president and his team. Let me just be very clear. The vice president has been involved in all policy. He is the right-hand man of the president on all policy matters, including Venezuela policy. He was, of course, read in and deeply involved in this operation from the very beginning. And he was present on the night of the operation via secure communication at a different location as to not damage the operational secrecy of this mission that was so incredibly important to ensure that this mission could be carried out successfully without endangering our troops. Sure.
The U.S. seized a tanker recently. Russia specifically asked the United States not to seize that tanker. Does this action risk a larger conflict with Russia?
I believe you're referring to the Bella 1 tanker that was seized this morning. The Department of Justice and the Department of Homeland Security, in coordination with the Department of War, did announce that seizure this morning for violations of U.S. sanctions. I've spoken about the enforcement of our sanctions policy at the podium prior to the new year, and this administration is going to fully enforce the sanction policy of the United States. The vessel this morning was seized in the North Atlantic pursuant to a warrant issued by a U.S. federal court after being tracked, and this was a Venezuelan shadow fleet vessel that has transported sanctioned oil, and the United States of America, under this president, is not going to tolerate that. I would also just add the vessel had a judicial seizure order in the crew, so that means the crew is now subject to prosecution for any applicable violation of federal law, and they will be brought to the United States for such prosecution if necessary. Kelly.
Caroline, Happy New Year to you.
Thank you. You too.
I'd like to talk to you about a couple of things real quickly. The first question about the Venezuelan people. As you know, there's some 8 million Venezuelans here, some of them celebrating in the streets. There are Venezuelans on the ground who are concerned about their safety. What does the Trump administration, what is it doing to actually help people in Venezuela understand that they will be secure throughout this transition?
I think the fact that this president actually followed through on the long-held promise of the United States of America, the bipartisan promise to take down the illegitimate Maduro regime, should give assurance to the Venezuelan people and also Venezuelan Americans who fled this communist regime for a better life here at home, that this is a president who is serious about taking down illegitimate regimes and who is also serious about securing the security of the United States of America, including the Venezuelan American people. And I would just add that this is something that not just Republicans and President Trump have talked about for a very long time, but it is also something that Democrats have advocated for. In 2020, Chuck Schumer said that at the time, President Trump had not brought an end to the Maduro regime. The Maduro regime is more powerful today and more entrenched today than it was when the president began. Now you hear Chuck Schumer out there saying this is reckless. The American people and the Venezuelan people should be in fear. But this is something that Chuck Schumer has long advocated for. Senator Chris Van Hollen, same thing, had said that the United States is going to use its leverage and influence to push for negotiations to transition to the truly elected leader. This was under President Biden. We know Maduro and his cronies don't want to go quietly into the night. The U.S. needs to work to ratchet up the pressure. Now, Senator Holland says it's an illegal act of war to get rid of Nicolas Maduro. So the hypocrisy is really astounding here, and thank you for giving me an opportunity to point it out, Kayla. Sorry, go ahead. Yes.
So there are reports that the administration is demanding that Venezuela cut ties with China, Russia, Iran, and Cuba. Can you confirm?
I'm sorry?
Reports that the administration has essentially demanded that Venezuela cut ties with China, Russia, Iran, and Cuba. Can you confirm that?
Well, those alleged demands were made in a classified briefing by Secretary Rubio, and I know that there's a lot of leaks coming out of these classified briefings, so I'm not going to confirm or deny or get into what the Secretary has said in classified settings to members of Congress. But I think that the administration has made it quite clear to the interim authorities in Venezuela that this is the Western Hemisphere, and American dominance is going to continue under this president.
If I could just ask, there have also been reports that the U.S. could potentially buy Greenland as one potential option on the table. What would such an offer look like? Is there anything monetarily you could provide, any details there?
Well, that's something that's currently being actively discussed by the president and his national security team. And I would point out that the acquisition of Greenland by the United States is not a new idea. This is something that presidents dating back to the 1800s have said is advantageous for America's national security. The president has been very open and clear with all of you and with the world that he views it in the best interest of the United States to deter Russian and Chinese aggression in the Arctic region. And so that's why his team is currently talking about what a potential purchase would look like.
Caroline.
Jackie.
Caroline, just following up on Greenland, why not rule out taking it by military force?
I know that past presidents and past leaders have often ruled things out. They've often been very open about ruling things in and basically broadcasting their foreign policy strategy to the rest of the world, not just to our allies, but most egregiously to our adversaries. That's not something this president does. All options are always on the table for President Trump as he examines what's in the best interests of the United States. But I will just say that the president's first option always has been diplomacy. Again, look at Venezuela. He tried ardently to strike a good deal with Nicolas Maduro, and he told him, I will use the United States military and you will not like it if you don't take such a deal. And look at what happened. With respect to Iran, the president said the same thing, right? He tried to have serious interest in a deal with the Iranian regime with respect to their nuclear capabilities. They were not interested, and so Operation Midnight Hammer happened, which was another remarkable military success under the leadership of this commander-in-chief. So the president keeps his options open, but diplomacy is always the first.
Quickly, just one additional follow-up on that. Does the president recognize Denmark's ownership as part of the kingdom? Because there have been some Republican senators questioning, the claim that Denmark has to Greenland. Is the president in that camp with them, questioning the legality of
I have not heard him question it personally, but you're welcome to ask him yourself next time you have the chance.
Sanctions are being lifted for Venezuela. We got to lift some sanctions to let the oil come in. Can you talk about that just very briefly?
Yes, so the U.S. is selectively rolling back sanctions to enable the transport and the sale of Venezuelan crude and oil products to the global markets, yes.
Caroline.
Annie.
Thank you. There are some reports from Venezuela that the country's leaders are cracking down on the population, specifically suppressing public expression of support for Maduro's ouster. Is that kind of behavior consistent with what the president wants to see, how the president wants to see the leaders take on the population?
It would not be consistent, and I'll let the president's national security team speak further on that. I know they are well aware and tracking. Kelly.
Two questions. One, on the seized vessels, the Bella, the Sophia, can you tell us where they're headed, what happens to any existing cargo, and you reference personnel but potentially facing prosecution? That's one thing I'd like to follow on. And then
on the Bella.
Yes, okay. And on Annie's question, if I could also ask, Does the administration believe that the interim regime should release all political dissidents and prisoners and return detained Americans?
That's not a question that I've personally spoken about to the president with, so I will let him answer that question. I don't want to make new policy at this podium today with respect to Venezuela. With respect to the two ships that you mentioned, I spoke with you about the Bella One. There was another vessel this morning, the Sophia, that in coordination with the Department of War, the Department of Homeland Security apprehended it. This is a stateless, sanctioned, dark fleet motor tanker, and this occurred without incident. This vessel was operating in international waters and conducting illicit activities in the Caribbean Sea. The U.S. Coast Guard is escorting the Sophia to the United States for final disposition. To answer your question, Kelly, directly, this was through Operation Southern Spear. The Department of War is unwavering in its mission to crush illicit activity in the Western Hemisphere. And as the President has repeatedly stated, we're going to defend our homeland and restore security and strength across the Americas. Dasha, go.
Caroline, thank you and Happy New Year.
Thanks, you too.
Two questions, one on Venezuela, one on Greenland. You've repeatedly at the podium called the current leadership in Venezuela interim leadership. There are Republicans and Democrats alike that say they want to see elections in Venezuela. The president had said it's too soon to do that right now, but is there a timeline for elections in Venezuela? Is he committed to seeing that this year, for example?
You just said the president has answered that question, so I will reiterate what the president has said a few times now to all of you, which is that it's too premature and too early to dictate a timetable for elections in Venezuela right now.
Caroline, you just talked to Jackie about diplomacy first, right? The Danes have repeatedly said they are willing to collaborate on all of the concerns that the president has, whether it's more troops, mineral rights, intelligence sharing. Why does the president feel he needs to own Greenland and not and put out the threat of military action when this could be done through diplomacy?
Well, who said diplomacy isn't taking place behind the scenes, Dasha? I mean, the president is interested in diplomacy. His national security team is as well. And of course, he's always willing to pick up the phone for everybody and hear out their concerns. But the president is the president of the United States of America, and he's always going to be very clear about what he views as being in our nation's best interest. Reagan.
Caroline, I have a question for you on Venezuela, and then I'd love to ask you about Minnesota and Tim Walz.
Sure.
On Venezuela, I'm wondering, does the administration hope to start sending more Venezuelan migrants back home or have them self-deport if the situation in the country improves?
As far as I'm concerned, the policies of the Trump administration and the Department of Homeland Security have not changed. All those illegally present in the country are subject to deportation. And I would just like to add, how we got here. The president was very clear on the campaign to the American public, and it's one of the many reasons they resoundingly reelected him back to this office, that he was not only going to crush foreign drug cartels, but that he was not going to stand by and watch as the illegitimate Venezuelan regime was sending illegal criminals and gang members and rapists and murderers to our country, which happened to the tune of thousands under the previous administration and president. And so there could be nothing more America first than this operation that took place last week. And I would just remind all of you in this room that there were innocent Americans like Jocelyn Nungare who lost their lives at the hands of dangerous Venezuelan criminals who were sent here by the Maduro regime. And that has been the president's North Star and guiding principle throughout his entire policy since January 20th.
Tim Walz in Minnesota. Does the administration believe that Tim Walz potentially dropped out of the governor's race because he could be under criminal investigation?
I don't know if there's a criminal investigation. If there was, I wouldn't be able to comment on it from up here, to be honest with you. But I think Tim Walz probably dropped out of the race because he realizes he no longer has the support of the people of his own state, which is a remarkable downfall considering he was the number 2 on the Democrat Party's ticket just about a year ago. When it comes to Minnesota, the fraud that we have seen, the wide scale of fraud is really remarkable. It's egregious. I would encourage every single journalist in this room to go to Minnesota and to cover it yourselves. As for the Trump administration, we have officials who have been on the ground almost every day. Secretary Noem was there yesterday. Secretary Bessent will be traveling there later this week to talk about the fraud and to do a roundtable on this very topic. And I would just like to leave you with an update. To date, the Department of Justice has charged 98 total defendants in several Medicaid fraud and related case programs. 64 were convicted, and 85 of the 98 charged were of Somali descent. The DOJ has also issued over 1,700 subpoenas, executed over 130 search warrants, and they have now added more attorneys to their office there to absorb the case flow. DHS is on the ground going door to door conducting large-scale criminal and HSI investigations. They have also sent approximately 2,000 agents to Minneapolis to assist with law enforcement and immigration enforcement. As I said, Secretary Noem was on the ground yesterday. The Department of Health and Human Services has also begun requiring a justification and photo evidence for all child care related payments nationwide, and they required Minnesota to conduct a full audit of all child care centers. They also froze $185 million in funding to Minnesota. And Dr. Oz, who was just here, also notified Governor Walz they're going to begin auditing Medicaid recipients and deferring payments on claims based on waste, fraud, and abuse. The Department of Labor is also conducting a targeted review of Minnesota's unemployment program. Department of Agriculture requiring Minnesota to conduct recertification for SNAP recipients, and HUD has launched investigations into the public housing. SBA has also suspended nearly 7,000 borrowers amid suspected fraudulent activity. So, with all of that, rest assured, this is an all-hands-on-deck effort from the entire administration to get to the bottom of this and to ensure that the ripping off of taxpayers in the state of Minnesota, and it won't just be Minnesota, it'll be any state across this country where fraud has taken place, and we are protecting law-abiding, tax-paying American citizens. Phil.
Thank you, Caroline. Just to follow up on Greenland, there are treaties already on the books that give the United States access to the island. They can construct and maintain military bases there. We can house personnel on the island. The U.S. has control of landings, takeoffs, anchorages, etc. So I'm curious if you could just spell out for the American public what specifically would the U.S. gain by taking control of Greenland that the U.S. doesn't already have access to right now?
More control over the Arctic region and ensuring that China and Russia and our adversaries cannot continue their aggression in this very important and strategic region. And there would be many other benefits as well that, again, the President and his national security team are currently talking about. Jeff, I'll give you another one. Welcome.
A broad sort of stand-back question on foreign policy. Are you concerned about increasing tensions with Russia because of the tanker seizures? And how does the U.S. action in Venezuela impact the ongoing relationship with China and the President's relationship with President Xi?
I think the President has very open, honest, and good relationships with both President Putin of Russia and also President Xi of China. He has spoken with them numerous times, as you know, since coming to office about a year ago, and I believe that those personal relationships are going to continue. But as for the President and the United States, he's going to enforce our policy that's best for the United States of America. And with respect to these ships seizures, that means enforcing the embargo against all dark fleet vessels that are illegally transporting oil, and only legitimate commerce, to answer your question much earlier, Rachel, determined by the United States, is going to be permitted. And that's the policy of this administration, and he's not afraid to implement it.
One more stand back. Just one more stand back. I just want to ask the last one. I remember asking the President at the very beginning of his term if he was committed to Article 5 and NATO, and he said yes. Has his stance on NATO or his commitment to NATO changed?
Did you see his statement earlier today? He said we will always be there for NATO even if they are not there for us, and I think that answers your question directly. Yes.
Just to follow up on what Jeff was saying there, will the President commit that if any NATO members are attacked, the United States will come to it?
Again, the President addressed this directly himself this morning after seeing the coverage from all of you in this room on television, and he made it very clear we're always going to be there for NATO, even if they have not done right by the United States of America. And they have not, they have finally increased their defense spending at the request of this president, but it was only because of this president that they did that. We'll take a couple more. Michael, go ahead.
Thank you, Caroline. Happy New Year and congratulations.
Thank you.
Two questions, if
You
I may.
too.
One on healthcare, one on Mexico. On healthcare, the President says he wants Republicans to be flexible on the Hyde Amendment in order to pass healthcare legislation. What is the White House's message to pro-life voters who say federal funding for abortion goes against their values?
Well, Well, the president did not change the administration's policy. It was President Trump who signed an executive order protecting the Hyde Amendment. It's the Trump administration that has taken multiple actions on various fronts to ensure that taxpayer dollars are not funding the practice of abortion. What the president was saying yesterday was Republicans, and frankly Democrats too, need to show a little bit more flexibility so we can actually get something done with respect to the issue of health care. Republicans have amazing ideas. The president himself, as we spoke about earlier, has launched this Most Favored Nation drug pricing initiative, has cut good deals with Big Pharma. He wants to see Republicans and Democrats too, if they're willing, codify those executive orders into law so that these good deals can remain and these prices can continue to be lowered long after this president and this deal maker in chief is gone. Presidents talked a lot about health savings accounts and giving more money back to the healthcare consumer rather than to these giant insurance companies, and he's been very outspoken and tough on them too, and I think you'll see more and hear more from him directly on that issue. So he wants to see Congress get something done with respect to health care, and that was the point that he was driving home yesterday.
Mexico, Caroline, President Trump says the drug cartels are running Mexico. What action does he need to see Mexico's president, Claudia Sheinbaum, take to prove that she's in control of that country, in control of those cartels? And does the White House believe she's able to do that without U.S. intervention?
Look, I think the president was speaking very candidly and frankly about the reality on the ground in Mexico. Haley.
Caroline, Happy New Year. I wanted to ask you about the seized tanker, the Vela. There were reports before this that Russia had sent a submarine to escort it. Was there any engagement with that submarine? And then was the deconfliction line with Russia used ahead of boarding that?
Again, this was a Venezuelan shadow fleet vessel that has transported sanctioned oil. The vessel was deemed stateless after flying a false flag, and it had a judicial seizure order. And that's why the crew will be subject to prosecution. Mary.
On Colombia, the president talked over the weekend and suggested that he would be open to an operation there. Should the president of Colombia be expecting Delta Force anytime soon? And then I had another one for you on California.
That would be a very unwise question for me to answer, to weigh into. What's your next question?
On California, can you share any more about the fraud investigation? The president said that there was one. Who's being investigated and where is it starting?
Again, this is going to be a all-hands-on-deck government-wide effort. The president has directed all agencies across the board to look at federal spending programs in not just Minnesota, but also in the state of California to identify fraud and to prosecute to the fullest extent of the law all those who have committed it. Take one more. Sure.
Thank you. Caroline, yesterday was the 5-year anniversary of January 6th. Democrats and mainstream media continue to push their big lie that it was an insurrection and that police officers died that day. The reality is that 4 Trump supporters died on January 6th and 2 women were killed by January 6th police. Everybody knows Ashley Babbitt was shot in cold blood by Capitol Police Officer Michael Byrd, but there was another woman, her name was Roseanne Boyland from Georgia, and she was pepperballed, gassed, and ultimately brutally beaten with a stick by January 6th police officer Lila Morris. The Biden administration and mainstream media lied and told Americans Roseanne Boyland died of a drug overdose on Capitol steps. Her family is now asking for an investigation. Is the administration aware of the circumstances of her death, and will there be an investigation finally?
Well, for an investigation, I will have to defer you to either the FBI or the Department of Justice, and I'm sorry to have to do that. But with respect to all of the facts that you just laid out, the White House relished the opportunity yesterday to actually create a new website to share the facts with the American public, but also all those in this room. We knew the media would be covering January 6th quite a bit because they think it's something that the American people are still believing their lies on. They think it's something that still helps their case against this president. Obviously not, or else he wouldn't have been reelected in an overwhelming fashion in November of last year. And so I would encourage everyone to take a look at the website. It's quite well done. And thank you all very much. It's great to be back with you.
Thank you.